Hey, good morning, good evening. Whenever you are going to be watching this, I appreciate you being here and watching this Bible study as we continue through the thread. This week we are looking at Joseph. Now Joseph is Jacob's son, and we've kind of jumped ahead a little bit of where Jacob's name has been changed to Israel. And so Israel is really starting to become a nation, and then Joseph is the youngest son of Jacob. Now Joseph has a lot of brothers, and it is Joseph that is the favorite. And so to start off, we're gonna summarize. It's like 4-5 chapters long of things. So instead of me reading 4 or 5 chapters, I'm going to briefly summarize the story of Joseph from what happened to him at his childhood to his adulthood. And then we're going to look at Matthew chapter 5. So Joseph is the youngest son, and he is Jacob's favorite. He gets a coat of many colors. He is proud of it. He wears it around. He has dreams of these dreams are prophetic dreams of where his brothers are going to be bowing down to him. Now, I don't know if Joseph was he was bragging a lot, but I don't know the intent of his bragging. I don't know if pride was being made in his heart or whatever, but whatever it was, his brothers didn't like it. He was the youngest, he was already the favorite, and now they were saying that they were going to bow down to him one day, and they didn't agree with that. They didn't want that to happen, and they even thought about killing him. But instead of killing him, they threw him in a well, and then slavers came by and they sold him into slavery in Egypt. So they were slave traders going to Egypt to sell their slaves, and they sell them to them, and he went and sold, and they went to Egypt to sell him. So going in, he becomes a slave. Jacob thinks he's dead. The brothers took his coat of many colors, killed a lamb, killed an animal, smeared it with blood and tore it, and said an animal ate him. So thinks he's dead. Lives the rest, basically almost to the end of his life, thinking that his son is dead. But Joseph ends up in Egypt. And in Egypt, he starts getting into some trouble. He's a slaver. He ends up working his way through the ranks in slavery. And he's prominent, he's smart, he's intelligent, and he ends up becoming a servant of a man named Potiphar. Now, Joseph was apparently a good-looking guy, handsome, well-built, nice and cordial. He wasn't rough and rowdy and crude and mean type of person. And Potiphar's wife sought after him and in a sexual way and trying to move on him in that, and he left. He darted. He ran from her, and in running from her, she grabbed his coat and pulled it off of him, and he leaves. In her embarrassment, she tells Potiphar that he tried to do that to her. So he throws Joseph in prison. And he stays in prison for a while. But while he is in prison, he interprets dreams of other prisoners. And time goes on, and those prisoners get out. Joseph is still in prison, but those prisoners get out. And they even promise, hey, we will tell of your great deeds and of who you are. Because the dreams, his prophetic dreams that he interpreted for them came true. Well, they forgot, or one of them forgot. The other one did pass away. The other one forgot. But as time progressed and it goes on, and this is years, by the way, he goes on, and then Pharaoh is having dreams that are unsatisfying to him. And the dreams are of cows eating other cows and blood and just tortured things. Not nice. They weren't nice dreams whatsoever. And he's having trouble figuring out what they mean. But then this guy comes up and says, hey, there's someone in prison that probably can interpret this dream because he interpreted mine and it came true. So they go and they get Joseph, and Joseph tells them of that there's going to be famine. That there's going to be famine for 7 years, after 7 years of prosperity. So he says, within these 7 years, you need to get ready and stockpile. You need to prep and be ready for the 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh puts Joseph as second in command. And so this story of when he was a kid, being prideful, being arrogant, thrown into a well and sold into slavery, brothers not liking him, doing all of that to him, ending up as a slave where slavery is not something that, even in Egypt, it wasn't like the best life ever. Going through all of that, abandonment, being alone, being a slave, being a prisoner, being treated harshly all throughout his life, and eventually getting to a point of where he was literally the second in command of all of Egypt. The only person higher than him was Pharaoh. And he gets there and he helps rule within those 7 years of prosperity. He stockpiles, he puts everything back. So when the famine hits, all the known world at the time has to go to Egypt to get food and to survive. And lo and behold, his brothers come to Egypt. Now, we're going to talk about that more next week. But what the thread that we want to pull through this that follows to Jesus Christ is Matthew, like I said, is Matthew chapter 5. And in Matthew chapter 5, we see Jesus is talking, and he's talking about persecution. And he says this, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So he's telling the New Testament church, he's saying, look, the Christian life is not something that is easy. It is not a boat ride. And we've been looking at, so far in Lesson 7, 6, and 5 especially, about patience, about waiting on God's promises, and us not trying to intervene and do them ourselves, of just let God's promises work out. And what we see in the story of Joseph is that God's prophetic dreams that he gave him as a child are coming true. But they are coming true through hardships and trials and just all of these difficult things that he's having to deal with in life. But yet Joseph did all of that, went through all of that, knowing God's promises were true and were going to be true. For us today, it's the same. And that is why I believe that Scripture records of that Christians should have peace and joy beyond understanding, is because no matter what calamity, pandemic, a hurricane, national disaster, terrorist attack, death, sickness, whatever it may be that happens to a Christian or the Christian family or world, that we know that the end result for us is joy and peace with Jesus in heaven for all eternity. That whatever God's promises are, whatever His purposes are, in His hand of us messing everything up along the way, yet His promises still being fulfilled, He holds true to His promises. And He won't break them. No matter how much we do, He won't break His end of the bargain. And I pray that you understand that you know that if you have salvation, you are a Christian, you have salvation, nothing is going to pluck you from that. Heaven is your reward. Now in that there is duty and there is task of that. No, we have to, the process of sanctification, of being more like Christ, of killing sin, rebuking it, getting it out of our way, becoming more like Him. And that's a process that is done by God and with our cooperation. But there are times we are going to mess up. We are going to sin. We're not going to be patient and try to do things our own way. Regardless of all of that, God's promises hold true. I love you. Thank you so much for joining me today. See you next time.